Are you trying to break into data analytics from a non-technical background? If so, today's episode is for you. I interviewed one of my Data Analytics Accelerator bootcamp students, Erin Shina, about her journey from music, a non-technical degree, a non-technical career, to a financial data analyst at Humana, a Fortune 500 company. Let's get into today's episode.
Welcome to the Data Career Podcast, the podcast that helps aspiring data professionals land their next data job. Here's your host, Avery Smith.
Today, I'm really excited about my guest. We have one of the members of the Data Analytics Accelerator who has gone through a portion of the program and landed a pretty sweet job that we're going to be talking about today. My guest today is Erin Shina. You studied music in school, but you no
Mhm.
longer work in music. So let's start off with what you're currently doing now. What do you do for work now?
Sure. So I am a financial analyst at a healthcare company called Humana nationwide. And essentially, I work in risk adjustment. So basically, looking at claims data, the data that comes through anytime you go to the doctor, and make sure that we're analyzing and filtering it correctly compared to the government agency that runs Medicare, and making sure that we are kind of aligning with them so that we can predict how much will be reimbursed for caring for those members. And so basically, we then take that analysis and use it to help us predict revenue and make projections for both what we'll get paid for or during this year and then in future years as well. So, yeah, that's the really pared down version of what I'm doing in a kind of complicated space. But yeah.
Okay, sweet. That's awesome. So basically, you have two music degrees. I think you have a bachelor's and a master's degree. And now I think your official title, is it a financial analyst? Is that what it is?
Yes. Yeah. So I it's 2 bachelor's degrees actually. My first one is in just kind of general music, and then my music therapy degree is another bachelor's. But yeah, so even less impressive, right?
Well, I mean, that's perfect. So two different music degrees, a music degree and a music
Mhm,
therapy degree. You were working
mhm,
as a music therapist, and now you're able to work as a financial analyst for a
mhm.
Fortune 50 company, solving problems when it comes to healthcare billing, it sounds like.
Yes,
That
correct.
that's awesome. That's the journey. That's a little foreshadowing of what we're going to be talking about today. So we're going to get into what your background is and how you got to where you're at today. But also, it does look like, I mean, I'm no expert. I don't work for Humana, but I'm guessing that your background back there is not the Humana offices. So can you tell us a little bit? Are you remote? Are you hybrid? Are you in the office right now?
I'm not in the office. I'm in my office at home. I'm a hybrid employee, so I do have one office day per week. Humana is like headquartered in Louisville, where I'm from, and so my team meets in the office on Wednesdays, and which works for me really well since I am a very extroverted person. But the rest of the time I am at home remote. It's actually rare that I'm in my office area instead of on the couch.
That's awesome. And I'm guessing that was not the case as a music therapist. Am I right?
It was not. No, I spent every day, even through the pandemic, every day at the hospital, spending most of my time in patients' rooms, sitting with them and providing music and, going through that therapeutic process. So a remote job was a very big change for me.
Okay. And how has it been? I know you mentioned that you're extrovert. Are you lonely at home? Do you get enough interface? Do you get enough support from your team?
Yeah, I'm really lucky. My team is super, super supportive. We use Microsoft Teams, so I am my boss constantly, whether she likes it or not. But I do feel like I get enough kind of interaction, and I really love my team and getting to see them on Wednesdays. But it's also really nice to just kind of be relaxed at home while I'm, working on my analysis and on, all of my daily tasks. And it feels very like right. The pace is still good. I'm still, kind of challenged every day, but it's much different than, having to like go into the hospital and kind of be part of that crazy environment.
That's awesome. I love hearing that because I love that you're like, yeah, I'm in my own office today, but to be honest, my real home office is my couch. I think that's awesome that you have the opportunity. The commute in the morning from the bedroom to the couch must be very,
Mhm.
full of traffic and stuff like that. But, all jokes aside, you had to deal with like a commute. You had to deal with traffic in your last job, right? That was a
Mhm.
decent amount of driving.
Yeah, I'm very lucky that I live close to the hospital where I was working, but yeah, I mean, I still had to get on the interstate and, make my way. Sometimes traffic was worse than others, but Yeah, I much prefer when my dog is the only one that's in my way trying to get to the office now.
Yeah, that is awesome. I also have a dog, and I can
Mhm.
testify of the power of having your dog as your coworker. It is like so much
Mhm.
fun. And now, I mean, one of the things that you probably couldn't do as easily when you were doing the hospital visits is like, for instance, oh, let's take the dog out for a walk, or I got to feed the dog, or I got to take the dog outside, or something like that. So I imagine that's gotten a lot easier since you've been able to work remotely.
Yes, yeah. Basil, my dog is, she's her quality of life has increased even more than mine, so
That's awesome. And that's what matters most, right? We don't really care about our own lives. It's just about our pups.
exactly. Yep, exactly.
Okay, awesome. And you mentioned that you're able to I am your boss and that communication's going well. Because one of the questions I get is, I want a remote job, but I'm also new to this field. And I'm kind of nervous that like I'm not going to be able to get enough training or get enough support from my team. You felt like that's been pretty good at Humana then?
Yes, yeah. My boss is a really wonderful mentor, and the kind of professional and personal development that my company invests in has been a really good support. There are lots of like modules and things that are provided just like by default from the company. But then also my boss has been really wonderful, and we'll hop on a Zoom and I'll share my screen, and I'll say like I think this is what's giving me a problem, but I can't, figure out what I need to change, or what does this actually mean? And she can tell me, and she'll kind of help me puzzle through it and figure out, where I went wrong, or how I should approach it in the future, or what to tweak. And so that's really helpful.
That's awesome. So you not only have like your boss, you're able to message anytime you get stuck, but you also have some sort of provided learning so that you're not like stuck with the skills that you're at right now. You can kind of upskill
Mhm.
as you go, it sounds like as well, right?
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. My next thing to tackle is getting into some Python for like moving data from one place to another. So I'm excited to get started on that in the next couple of weeks.
Sweet. That's awesome. Very cool. Okay, awesome. So actually, while you mentioned Python, let's talk
Mhm.
about as an entry level financial analyst, new to the field, what
Mhm.
type of tools are you using on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah. So biggest one is SQL. We use SQL Server and kind of the whole like Microsoft suite, all of that. Lots of Excel for the kind of like financial part of it. But most of my analysis and most of the testing that we're doing is within SQL. And yeah, it's been really fun to kind of take the skills that I know, like just in my own little like simple projects, into actual like millions and millions of rows of data, and see how it translates. um
Yeah, I'm sure some
yeah.
of it is very similar. Like you kind of have the base for it, but it's probably like
Mhm.
you're doing things you might not have necessarily expected and using things kind of in a new way with this new application.
Yes, yeah, there's a lot of kind of logical, like analytical thinking, and that's part of the learning curve of going into this specific industry like healthcare. I thought, being in the hospital every day, I thought I knew all of the acronyms that came with like the medical, field, but apparently I didn't. Health insurance is like totally different. So, yeah, lots of acronyms, lots of kind of the logical analytical thinking to get from point A to point B, and then figure out how to get there in SQL.
Yeah. Okay. I love that. And that's something that we didn't necessarily talk about. I mean, we mentioned your background, we mentioned your music degrees. We
Mhm.
said the term music therapy a couple times. I wasn't familiar with music therapy beforehand. So maybe if you don't mind, will you just give like a quick introduction to what you were doing? You kind of mentioned it earlier, but if I was a 5-year-old, what is music therapy?
Sure. So, the go to line, I guess, is that music therapy is using music to accomplish non musical goals. So, in the hospital, what I was doing most of the time was using music for decreasing pain, decreasing anxiety, kind of providing that additional emotional support that people often don't get, especially when they're going through something that is, you know, potentially like traumatic and scary for them, like being in the hospital. And, we worked really closely with our like hospice and palliative care team. So a lot of folks who are going through kind of the end of life process. And yeah, that's kind of what my daily life was like.
Yeah, and I think that's important to realize because one of the tips that we talk about throughout the Data Analytics Accelerator is can we find you a stepping stone job, right? Because you're new to this world of data, right? You're new to this world of data. You had no prior, math jobs or science jobs, right? It was the music stuff, right? But you were able to land this financial analyst role pretty quickly, like within about 90 days. I was trying to find our exact, when you told me you had the interview and you had the offer, and when you joined like right before Christmas. And then I think you started working like mid-March, right?
Yes. Yeah. So I signed up, clicked submit or whatever on the accelerator package like right before Christmas, started actually like doing the program right after Christmas, like the week before Christmas and New Year's. And I think my job, the interview was on March 1st, which was a Wednesday or whatever the Wednesday was that week. And then that Friday, I accepted my offer. So, yeah, I was not expecting that. But
That's not even 60 days, because February is not even 30 days, right? So that's
right.
basically, yeah. So that's awesome and absolutely incredible. Congratulations. I cut you
Thank you.
off. Keep talking us through that journey.
Yeah. So I should back up and say that part of what I was doing before kind of getting into the accelerator boot camp, when I was looking into data analytics as a potential, career move, I did kind of what anybody does and just Googled it and landed on the Coursera, like Google
Hmm.
data analytics program. And I was doing that for a while. I think I started that sometime in the summer last year. Felt like I was understanding things. I didn't I didn't have any, foundational knowledge besides like using Excel for budgeting. And, I think it was a really good introduction into like what is data analytics and all of that sort of thing. But I made it like three quarters of the way through, but I didn't feel like I could like actually apply my knowledge in a way that was helpful for me. I was like understanding it as I was going through, but there weren't any steps after that. So I was looking for something that was just more hands-on and more like active for me. That's how I tend to learn best. And so I was, just kind of looking to see what was out there. And I think you had a sale going on. I saw on LinkedIn and I was like, that sounds good. Most boot camps are like 5 grand plus. And, that's not something that in my previous job that I could even consider budgeting for in any kind of, reasonable timeline for wanting to make a career move. So I was like, sounds great. This guy's cool. I'm going to just do this and see where it goes. And so from there, that's kind of when I started like doing the Analytics Accelerator bootcamp and the curriculum. And I think that is what really made a big difference for me.
Yeah, I think your story is, very similar. In fact, someone emailed me today and said, how is your program different than the Google Data Cert, which is a common question. And I think you kind of nailed it, like actually applying what you've learned, right? And then really focusing on creating the projects and the networking, right? Because at the end of the day, if you don't have the projects, you don't have the network, it's a lot harder to land that job. And then also just doing it
Mhm.
kind of with someone, like someone that's able to, talk to you. I know you were pretty active on our community, so having all the peers around you, I think that's pretty helpful for most people. And the other thing you did really well is, and I mean, I think this was helpful. You can tell me if I'm wrong, but you were trying to land a data job. You don't have necessarily the what people would consider the traditional or the ideal background. I don't think there is a traditional or ideal background for data analytics, but that's besides
Mhm.
the point. But you found this job inside of healthcare. And you have been working in healthcare as this music therapist. You've been visiting hospitals. Like you said, hospital speak a little bit, like the acronyms and stuff like that. Did that play a role in helping you land this job? Like, was that helpful to know the hospital stuff?
Yeah, I think so. Especially during my interview process, that was something that I spoke to a lot, and having kind of that background knowledge of just how the industry works and understanding like, yeah, I might not know like the back end of health insurance, but I know like what these things mean. And I know, kind of why things are set up the way that they are, even if I don't know the details of like how it works on the back end. And one of the projects I think that really helped me kind of be able to speak to that was the sequel project in the accelerator, the healthcare analysis. That was something that I talked about in all of the interviews that I had. And they were really interested to know, not only to see that I had some SQL skills, but also just to see like that I had used my prior knowledge and like how I had applied that understanding of the industry to the analysis like with SQL. So that I think was really helpful for me in
Yeah.
in that whole interview process.
Gosh, I mean, I should have realized that, but I didn't even realize that. And that's so cool because They were like, hey, we're hiring for a financial data analyst role. The hope is that someone will understand data analytics, they'll understand SQL, and they'll understand hospital, or I guess healthcare data. And you were like,
Mhm.
oh, well, here's a project I've done that you can read where I analyzed, I can't remember how much data is in that one, like 1.6 million rows of hospital
Mhm.
data, like looked at outcomes and like looked at like what procedures led to these different things and how race played a role in the hospital and stuff like that. And you were like, just here you go. This is my evidence, right? Are you interested?
Uh-huh.
That must have been really powerful for the recruiter. They're like, oh, wow, SQL projects with healthcare data. I'm sure they didn't have very many other projects like that. If I were to guess, I don't know, but if I were to
I
guess.
I don't know who else applied, but apparently I did something right, so
Yeah, because you interviewed and then like 3 days later had an offer.
Yeah, yeah,
That's amazing. That's
yeah.
so amazing. Congrats.
Thank you.
One of the things I want to highlight that makes me so
Mhm.
happy to hear, because when I was designing the analytics accelerator, I was like, okay, we have to do projects. And to be perfectly honest, when I first got into helping people land data jobs, I had the same philosophy that projects were the way. But I had a little bit of a different twist where I was like, projects should be fun. It's always fun to do your own personal data. So when I originally launched my boot camp, all of the projects were actually from your own life, like your own screen
Mm.
time on your phone, the data, the music you listen to, and stuff like that. And that those projects were really fun. And I think they were very impressive to recruiters and hiring managers. They were a little bit harder because it's just hard keep getting your own data. But now that we've transitioned to using data from all the different industries. I'm so happy to hear that when I was choosing the 9 industries for the 9 projects, I was like, man, there's so many industries. Which ones do we choose? And I'm so glad to hear that the healthcare and the SQL combo was at least useful for one person. That's so good to hear.
Yes. Yes, for sure. And actually, I think just having the projects in general and having the specific tools for a specific project, I think was really helpful. And, you know, maybe just also to highlight another aspect of the boot camp. I think the difference for me, I was applying to things kind of, throughout the time that I was, doing all the modules, and I wasn't really getting a lot of bites and, kind of trying to network and get referrals for jobs. But I think the thing that made the difference was I went to one of your, I don't remember if it was a live session or just a module, but all about resumes and like optimizing your resume. And so I added, like, literally as I was watching, I was like, okay, I'm going to add these links to my portfolio projects. I'm going to add, a blurb about what I learned, what I analyzed, and why, and what I found. And I like sent off a round of applications kind of with that new resume, with my projects added, like an actual section, not just a link to my portfolio site. And I like literally had 3 interviews lined up for like that same week
Wow.
from just that difference. And that was, one of the one of those interviews that I had is the role that I ended up accepting.
Did you apply to that job or did they find you?
So I applied for it. I know several people that also work for Humana, and I had someone who was willing to let me be, my referral. So definitely worked kind of with my network and connecting with people to get my in. Humana is a company that I have, considered working for a long time. And, I know just from having those personal relationships with people here that they treat their employees really well. And so I was like, oh yeah, that's like a company I really want to work for. So that's kind of how I was focusing my networking attention. But yeah, I had very quick turnaround from submitting those applications to hearing from recruiters for the specific positions.
Okay, there's a lot there I want to unpack. Number one, did you apply on like LinkedIn Jobs, Indeed, or on their website?
On their website. So I found them on LinkedIn, but I went to the website to apply.
Two, one of the things I want to highlight here is I don't know if you remember this, but the job description, it probably said hybrid on the job description, do you think? And I want to highlight that because this is like a super underrated play that everyone is sleeping on right now. And that's the idea of hybrid jobs.
Mhm.
Everyone is like, oh, I don't want to be in person, right? So they go to LinkedIn jobs, they use the Boolean search for remote, and they're competing with literally thousands of other people for these remote jobs because literally you can be all over the US or the world, right? And be an applicant for this job. But like your role, you're in the office like what? 8 hours a week on
Mhm.
Wednesday. If you want to, like, work from home from, the rest of the days, you can. If you want to, I don't know Humana's exact policy, but let's just say you want to go visit your parents or I don't know, your brother, right? You could leave Wednesday night and come back home, Tuesday night. Like that's like a week that you could be working somewhere else. Like you're not quite remote, but you're 90% there, right? I guess
Right.
literally 75%, right? Or what 80% there.
Yeah,
But
80, yes.
but it's pretty good, right?
Yeah, and like I said, I am a really extroverted person, so I really like, I think we get less done on Wednesdays than we do like when we're all remote, because we're catching up with each other and, socializing a little bit. But yeah, my team has a lot of freedom outside of those in-person days. And, if you do need to take a remote day, that's also fine. I had a coworker yesterday who was like, "Yeah, I just I'm not feeling super well, not well enough to not work, but can I just stay home today?" And
Mm.
my team was like, "Oh, yeah, of course. Just call into the meeting that we have and we'll be fine." So
That
there's a lot of flexibility there.
And that's awesome. And I think people are like, no, I only want a remote job. But the hard thing is, like, when you're doing a remote job, you're competing with people, not only in Louisville, right? You're competing with people all over the country. But if you're hybrid,
Mhm.
that job pool that they're selecting from, the candidate pool, is so much smaller. And so you can stand out
Mhm.
so much more as a candidate. The third thing I want to mention is, you mentioned the referral, and people are going to
Mhm.
be like, well, okay, I don't know anyone, no one's going to refer me. But the people that referred you, what part of the company do they work for?
Not mine. Yeah, there are several organizations kind of within Humana, and they are in one that is parallel with mine, but they are not in finance at all. I even asked her, she like looked into some of the jobs when I was talking with her, and she was like, "Yeah, I don't know these hiring managers, but I know this person who, worked with this other person." And, she kind of connected some dots, but she didn't know anyone personally who was like in charge of hiring or, the next like three steps up from my manager. So, yeah, I think it's a powerful thing to, even if you can get a referral from someone, even if they aren't directly involved with the position that you're applying for, I think it's really worth it to try to, still build those relationships and see if they can help you out.
Yeah, 100%. Like when I'm working with a lot of people, they're like, Avery, I don't know anyone to get referrals. And the answer to that is bull crap. Unless you're brand new to the country and you've never like you don't speak English or like you haven't really met people, like you at least know someone who works somewhere. And sometimes that person's gonna work at like as a grocer at Smith's Family Grocer. And like that's not going to be useful. But like you probably have at least, 20 contacts in your phone. Like open up your phone and go through one by one and just be like, okay, Paul Adams, where does he work? Alejandro Okerlund, where does he work? Paul Alstrom, where does he work? And think through, do these people work for a company that have an opening for a data analyst? Yes or no? And if they do,
Mhm.
it doesn't matter if they're in marketing or if they're in sales or if they're really doesn't really matter because the company just wants to kind of hire good people. And if that person's at that company, that's probably because they think that person's a good person. And so if that person
Mhm.
has a friend, that's probably also another good person. And so just having any sort of referral from any company employee, I think is worth exploring. And I think it gives you a leg up in the application. So I think a job well done from you because you went for the hybrid, you went for the referral. And I mean, that's what allows you to, do an interview and then bam, you have an offer like 2 days later.
Yeah, it wasn't a short process, from starting getting into data at all to, accepting a job offer, but I think the steps that I took in the last, couple of months of that journey really made the difference. And yeah, a lot of it was kind of prompted by the accelerator program. So thank you for that.
Yeah, of course. I'm so glad it worked out for you. Okay, before we let you go, I gotta ask you a few more questions about the interview. Was it technical?
No. And maybe part of it was because I had projects to kind of show what I knew, but there wasn't like an assessment for me for any of the jobs that I interviewed for, kind of in that round of interviewing. I talked about my projects a lot. They asked questions about the projects themselves and kind of what
Specifically,
I
like the
learned.
projects you had done?
Yes, yeah. So the healthcare one, I talked about, oh, I forget which is which now, but I talked about I think Massachusetts
Yeah.
education one.
Uh-huh.
I talked about that one. I talked a little bit about the data visualization one that I had on my portfolio, but yeah, I like they would ask me specific questions about, like what was your process with this? How did you come to this conclusion based on this data and things like that, rather than like, here is a data set. Can you query this? Like I didn't have to do any of that like really technical stuff. I think because they could see that I knew, how to at least do a select from where statement, and then they could ask me those deeper level questions
Yeah.
based on my portfolio.
I think that's so powerful because one of the things we talk about in DAA is a lot of times the people interviewing you are busy people and they don't want to
Mhm.
be interviewing you. And so they're coming up with questions 5 minutes before they're actually doing the interview. That's not true of everyone, but a lot of the times I've hired people and I know that I've done that before. So
Mhm.
sometimes if you give them projects, all of a sudden you just gave them material for them to ask you questions about. And you kind of flip the interview where you've almost made the interview about stuff that you know and stuff that you've done versus them just like randomly asking you questions, which I think is really, it makes it way less nerve wracking and it makes you look more impressive. So I think that's
Mhm.
a win-win. So overall, you felt prepared and it was just the one interview.
Yes. So for the role that I had, it was in person, which was helpful for me because I tend to do really well when I'm talking to people and feel less nervous than, if it's like a phone interview or something like that. But it was one day, but interviews with several people on the team. But we had really similar conversations kind of between that as pertains to kind of their role and the difference between the role that they're hiring for. But yeah, I felt really prepared. I felt like I knew what I was talking about kind of going in. I obviously had done these whole projects and could speak on them. And so that made me feel really confident in my skills and also in my like, presence and being able to really engage with them instead of being worried about, am I going to remember how to like what the syntax is for this, specific thing that they're going to ask me about.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. The projects brings confidence. That's an important
Mhm.
takeaway.
Yeah.
Okay. And then we did have a question here. You can answer this to your heart's content as much detail as you do or not. But the question is, did you feel the need to negotiate or were you pretty happy
Mm.
with your offer?
So, as I mentioned, I had interviews for 3 different roles, kind of, all at the same time. It was that, like, last round of applications that I sent in after changing my resume, had all those interviews within, that same week. The ones on that Wednesday were the last ones, and the recruiter contacted me and actually said that I had gotten offers from all 3 and that they wanted to, see what was my preference and that sort of thing. And I didn't negotiate with numbers necessarily, but I said that a salary would play a part in my decision of which role to take. And so I asked if they could give me, a range for each one. So they came back with that and, told me the ranges of what they could offer for each role. And then I was really happy that the one that I had wanted the most did actually have, the highest offer as well, the highest range. And so I, happily took that one. So I didn't have to necessarily negotiate. And then when I like accepted that offer, they said it was going to be the highest end of the range they'd given me. They just gave me that top number.
So
So
you got what you wanted.
exactly. Yeah. I didn't have to like, negotiate like face to face with somebody, but, you know, letting them know that was an important part of my decision.
I think that's good. A lot of people will talk about negotiating, and I think I'm probably not the best teacher of negotiation, if I'm being honest. I've never really
Hmm.
negotiated that much, but so many students in our program have just been so happy with the offer that they get that I mean, negotiating is always probably a good idea. But anyways, a lot of people have just been super happy that they're like, I'll take it. I'm so stoked with this. Right. If someone offered me $10 million right now to go work for them, I'm not negotiating. I'm taking the $10 million,
Right.
right? And I mean, kind of the same idea there. Hey, so one with this, any advice that you'd like to give to people with non-traditional backgrounds, people with maybe music backgrounds? What would you
Mhm.
say that had helped you in your journey, or what advice would you give them?
Yeah. So, number one piece of like actionable advice is to do projects. Do projects that are based on skills that you have or, the industry that you have, and then also ones that show that you have knowledge for where you want to go. So, if it's healthcare, if it's, marketing, like whatever you're trying to kind of break into, do projects with that. Show that you know how to use the technical skills in that industry. And then just in general, I think something that I realized through my journey was that even if you are like just starting and you don't really have a whole lot of like foundational knowledge to go off of, you are more capable and you know a lot more than you think that you do. Everything transfers to everything else. I guarantee that there's something that you like do in your daily job that relates to, your data analytics learning. And I think that if you have started on this journey and, are, even if you are at the beginning, you've done the hard part of like making the decision and starting. And so now it's just about consistency and, keeping that going.
I love that. I hope you guys listening take that to heart. Keep in mind, that was a music therapist telling you that you have something in your current job that is relatable to data analytics. If you ask me like the most opposite of a data analytics job ever, I might say a music therapist. But you're absolutely right, Erin, that no matter what you're doing, you can relate something to what you're currently doing. It is
Mhm.
experience for a data analyst job. So, don't be discouraged when you see, 1 to 2 years of experience, 2 to 5 years of experience. You have some sort of
Mhm.
experience that you can draw. And I loved the advice on doing projects. So, Erin, thanks so much for being on the show. Thanks for sharing it with all of us here.
Thanks so much for having me.
How great was Erin and her story? Big shout out to her for coming on the pod and sharing that with all of us. And I hope that you guys can kind of take a lot from her journey. The idea of trying to apply to jobs quickly, the idea of using her network, the idea at looking at hybrid jobs, and also the importance of projects. As always, you guys, I have some resources in the show notes down below to help you guys get started on your data journey. I'm here if you have any questions and would love to have you be part of the Data Analytics Accelerator. If that's of interest to you, you can look in the show notes down below. Have a good weekend, everyone, and data on.